Good afternoon. Sheriff Knezovich and I are here as a result of, at least on my part, for a phone call that I received yesterday afternoon from the Spokesman Review that I did not get a chance to respond to about a settlement that the county and the risk pool had reached with the attorneys for Mr. Murray's and his family. So the article came out, and the sheriff and I have discussed the article a little bit, and we feel that some of the language in there needs to be refined a little bit, and some of the facts as alleged in there need to be addressed. I also received an email just a few minutes ago from CRIM 2 requesting an interview, so I thought, well, I'm on the way over here anyway, so I didn't respond to the email because I figured that the information that you're looking for is going to come out in this process as opposed to a separate interview. So for my part, and I know that the press always likes to point out how many officer-involved shootings have occurred that the Spokane County prosecutors over a period of 20 or more years have yet to charge an officer. My response to that is I would hope that the public would take great pride in the fact that the officers are following the law. This process is very detailed. It takes a long period of time. And as the county prosecuting attorney and under the current law before it changes, I'm charged with looking at the completed investigation, looking at the conduct of the officer or officers that are involved, and making a legal determination as whether or not they complied with 9A 16040, which is the defense statute for an officer who applies deadly force and reaching a conclusion. But they also sometimes insinuate that we just don't charge police officers with crimes. And that's simply not true. And mindful of the fact I've only been the elected since 1/1 of 15, we have conducted jury trials, and I know that you know this because you cover them. When officers violate the law, if the facts available to my office meet the statutory standard, they're going to be charged, and the prosecution will move forward just like any other case. In this particular case, I looked at the completed investigation, and in addition to the investigation for the officer conduct, the investigators also seek witnesses that are in the area that may have either video or have seen something or overheard something. And there was a witness in this case in particular that observed and overheard a good bit of the interaction between Deputy Wallace and Mr. Murray, and largely corroborated exactly what was in Deputy Wallace's report, and corroborated the information that he provided to the investigators independently. I used that in my analysis along with the statutory look and determined that Deputy Wallace was justified under these circumstances in applying deadly force. And there's nothing in this article that came out in yesterday's Spokesman that would cause me to second guess or question my opinion based on the duties that are assigned to me under the statutes.
Sheriff, would you like to go next?
I can. I would note that the reporter who wrote the Spokesman Review article, Emma Epperly, is not here. She was told about the press conference, and she couldn't make it. So when I received a copy of this morning, I looked at it, and I just wonder when it is that defense or plaintiff's attorneys maybe get held accountable for some of the stuff that they put out. Because it seems a plaintiff's attorney can paint whatever picture they want, and fact or not, and that's what gets presented to the public. And I find that very disturbing in that, quite frankly, if one of my deputies had done something like that, we'd fire them. Because that's what we deal with fact. But it seems like every time we have to go through one of these things, we're faced with these, very salacious allegations. And, I do agree with a statement that was made in this article, though, made by Miss Murray. The system failed her son. The system failed her son. My question is why the media never covers why this system's broke. Why the media never covers the truth behind why this system is so fatally broke. This individual was arrested and released within 17 minutes. When I ran the Spokane County Jail, and I haven't run the jail since 2013, the jail was designed to deal with mental health issues. We were the only jail in the state of Washington certified to deal with mental health issues. My question is, why did somebody that was, clearly showing these type of issues, how did they get out in 18 minutes? Because under the system that we had designed, we designed the system simply because we got tired of a revolving door of people with mental health issues getting arrested, released, arrested, released. We used to hold them, get them stabilized, and then released back into a safety net. What happened? Well, I can tell you what happened. The jail is so horribly crowded right now, it does not function properly anymore. When do we deal with that?
Why? What needs to change then in that regard?
The system needs to be fixed. And you've heard that ad nauseum. For 17 years, I've been involved with this issue. The system needs to be fixed, and we need to have a structure. The plan to fix it sits on a shelf collecting dust. It's been there since 2011. Maybe it's time to ask other elected officials why this hasn't moved forward. It's not because Larry and I fight against it. Matter of fact, we're proponents for it. But that is an accurate statement. The allegations that this plaintiff's attorney gets to make is, tries to allege that there's some kind of cover-up. Well, if it is, it's the worst cover-up in the world. Because if it was a cover-up, why would we document what happened with that knife in such a thorough way? Because if it was a cover-up, wouldn't it make sense that we would have, if we look at Hollywood's scenario, it'd be a throwdown knife and, oh look, he did have a knife. No, it was documented that here's how. That knife wasn't even found in the area of the body. It was found on the outer perimeter of the inner perimeter. It was highly documented as to what happened with it, but this plaintiff's attorney gets to paint a picture. And here's the dangerous part of that. Once the myth is out there, the myth never dies. We see that with Ferguson, with the fact that there are still people in this nation that believe that Michael Brown was shot surrendering hands up, which did not happen. Did not happen. But the myth never gets fixed. Once that myth is out there, I and Larry, I know, I've seen the myths go, and it takes about 5 years to finally get the truth out. And that's why I take these type of, poorly written stories so serious. This is not good for the community. And I can tell you that they always want to go back to issues. I'll tell you one of the main issues with the reason that there was a settlement in this is because these are business decisions made by people that we don't even get to talk to. You're looking at the two last people in this county that learned that this had been settled. We don't get any input into it, but there's insurance folks that look at it and go, well, they have 5 attorneys and each attorney is going to be, racking up bills and everything else, and those bills rack up very quickly and very substantially. $250,000 is not unheard of for an attorney's bill. So it's all a business decision. The amazing part is I wonder how much the plaintiffs of this case actually got versus what their attorneys received. How much money did the family actually get versus what the attorneys received? And what's even worse is training is one of the vital issues that we face in this state. I have a question for the reporters in the room. Are you aware that all 39 sheriffs of the state of Washington sent a letter to the governor of the state of Washington demanding a review of the Criminal Justice Training Commission because it is in shambles, it's in chaos, and based on their own experts' review of their curricula, says it's legally indefensible? What do you think that did to every single agency in the state of Washington when it comes to these type of matters, when I can no longer get on a stand and go, yeah, I know that the training that they receive is the best possible? What do you think that did to our ability? Do you want to take that one to trial? No one wants to take that to trial, but that's the problem that we have been put in, and no one seems to want to cover. And I have done my level best to get this message out. Miss Epperly, when she's written about this in the past, tried to frame it that we want to cut law enforcement training. That's never been the case. We want the best law enforcement training possible. I don't know if my PIO was able to get the press release out that the Spokane Sheriff's Office is the only agency in the United States, the entire nation, that takes the time to try to get our training certified at the national level. Why? Because we know that we have a problem in the state of Washington, and we're doing everything we can to fix that problem to ensure that our people have the best training possible. But what does the Spokesman Review want to focus on? Killology training. It's right here. A myth that has been put into our community that I'm still trying to stamp out. But let's take a look at how many of my people that have been trained in that and how much of it we put on. In the last 16 years, there's been 13 people attend this not mandatory training. It's if they want to go, they can go. Most of this was put on by outside agencies, and there's only 4 left in this agency that actually have attended any of that training. Does that sound like our doctrine? Does that sound like something we ingrained in anybody? Here's the worst part. The myth of the warrior mindset is just that, a myth. That argument started in the state of Washington, and it started with the warrior versus guardian nonsense. I've been in law enforcement 32 years. I've never been trained to be a warrior. The true title of my profession in this state is a peace officer. So when do we get off the garbage? When do we stop writing myth versus what the facts are? If this was really our mindset, there'd be 260 people trained in this. This is not mandatory training, nor does Mr. Grossman train anybody to kill. without remorse, mind you, and that's what was put out during the episodes of this. It's very, very bad reporting and very agenda driven, and that's what's wrong with the narrative in these cases. I'm just so tired of the myths and the rhetoric used, because statistically, if this was any other issue, Larry, we talking about follow science. What does the science say about law enforcement use of force in America? It happens rarely. The use of excessive use of force happens at a rate that is statistically insignificant, which means it happens so rarely you can't put a statistical value to it. That means what? That we're doing our best, and we're doing it as best as we can, and we are doing the job correctly. That's why he's not prosecuting more. And that's why statistically in the United States, law enforcement officers aren't prosecuted. But please don't tell me they're not held accountable, because I've fired 90 people out of this agency. So please do not even try to go there.
Well, I don't work for the spokesman, but I do know that there are people who have concerns when they hear about claims that an officer was given more leniency, when they talk about the time that was allowed to file a report. How do you respond to that?
Very simple. Whitney, if you got in a shooting today, self-defense, do you have to give me a statement? No, you don't. You have this thing called the Fifth Amendment. All right? And you won't be arrested. We've had people shoot people in self-defense in this community. They're not arrested. They get a chance to talk to their attorneys. They do come in and eventually give a statement now and again. And an officer has the same constitutional rights that you do. We didn't throw away the constitutional right by putting this on, even though we threw many of our rights away. We threw the right to be able to fight against defamation, but we didn't throw our right of the Fifth Amendment of the United States away. They do not get anything special. They are afforded the same right that you, as a citizen, are.
What do you say to the people who say there is a perception that law enforcement officers are granted this innocent until proven guilty mindset, that they are not necessarily treated the same as if just a public person were to be involved in the same type of incident?
You know, that's a naive statement, and it is what you just said, perception. And perception is very rarely reality. Do you know what happens instantaneously when an officer has to make that decision to pull the trigger and shoot somebody? They automatically become a criminal suspect. You go from being the good guy to being a criminal suspect in nanoseconds. Am I wrong on that?
Not at all. And to comment further on the perception, everybody is innocent until proven guilty. And law enforcement is no different that way. And they get no deference. I noticed in the article it pointed out that in the lawsuit there were requests that officers be required to provide written statements within a 24-hour period. Can't do that to anybody. I can't get it from any other defendant or any other suspect or any other person suspected of committing a crime. To think that you could put a requirement in the police have to respond and give a statement within 24 hours violates their constitutional rights. And as the sheriff said, everybody has the same constitutional rights, whether you're wearing a badge or whether you're a citizen on the street who's been picked up and arrested on probable cause.
And I'll tell you that the perception, the people that want to walk with that perception, their perception is we're guilty before proven innocent.
Does the fact that there is now a $1 million settlement speak to a need for perhaps more transparency in how these cases are evaluated, or at least more emphasis on how to respond to individuals in a mental health crisis?
Whitney, let's take it back to 2005, because this is one thing that the activists and those who like to portray this the way you just asked that question don't ever give their law enforcement in this area the credit for what they have done in those arenas. 2005, the Spokane Police Department started breaking the records with CIT training. They were one of the first agencies in the United States to do it. In 2007, the Spokane County Sheriff's Office and the Spokane Police Department teamed together and created excited delirium training. First in the nation ever to do it. 2017, we were the first agency in the nation to get nationally certified in de-escalation training. We've won awards for these type of things. And no, what it is a system that is horribly broken, because this individual was put in the Spokane County Jail, and had the facility been working the way it had in the past, he would have received his mental health treatment. He would have been stabilized, and maybe we wouldn't have been out there again.
So what is the answer then? Knowing that the jail has the capacity that it has, do we need to build a bigger jail? Do we need more mental health intervention within the facility? What's the answer?
The answer is multifold. You need consistent programming within this arena. We've never had that. But you don't get that unless the system functions. And part of that system is infrastructure. You know, let's face it, the people that have prevented us from fixing this have done what? All the sheriff wants is a bigger jail. That's the narrative. If you've been in this community more than 15 years, you know that that is the narrative that is used. It's not about a bigger jail. It's about the proper functioning jail. A jail that actually has the capability of bringing somebody into a booking area that is not a booking area, it's a triage center, where you make the determination, do they really need to go to the jail, or is this something that we have to deal with as far as a mental health or a drug addiction issue? We don't have that capability, but that plan does. The one I mentioned that's been sitting on a shelf since 2011, that plan has all that in there. So maybe it's time to ask Brian Biggs why he has fought against this so much, because it is actually smart justice. That plan was created by one of the leading experts in smart justice in the nation. And it has a community resource, and I'll use the term that Brian wants to use now. He doesn't like community correction, but community resource center. But that's where all your programming lies. And then there are people that have to go to jail. There is a plan out there. But when are we going to have the political will to get it done? And when are those who like to put forth these perceptions and these myths going to stop fighting us, get to the table, and help us figure out where to get it done? When does that happen?
Looking at what has transpired, and that there is now this $1 million settlement that has been approved, what are the lessons learned to bring into your department about how to respond in those situations? Do you think everything in that incident with Murray happened exactly as it was supposed to?
It happened exactly how it was brought forward. One thing that you don't realize, and I wish I could put a badge on you and put you out on the field and have you experience what that was truly like, because Larry and I talked about it, and Larry actually pointed out one of the most correct statements ever stated in this thing is that deputy was never given a chance to de-escalate anybody. I can de-escalate anybody, Whitney, as long as you allow me to. If you don't allow me to de-escalate you, nothing I can do. I simply react to what you're going through. Eastern State Hospital calls my deputies to come and deal with assaults and everything else at more often than I like to imagine. We just had somebody killed at Eastern State Hospital. Now, they're supposedly the experts in de-escalation, correct? then why are they calling us? De-escalation only works if we have the time, the place, the opportunity, and the individual has the ability to be de-escalated. Some people don't have that ability if they are suffering extreme mental illness or are extremely high on drugs. But I believe that Larry's statement was spot on. That deputy did not have the ability. Larry, do you want to speak to that?
Excuse me. As the spokesman and other local news agencies have pointed out, in the time that I have been the elected, and I can only accept responsibility for those that I have reviewed, but these things unravel sometimes in literally seconds. Officers are put in a position where they have to make life-saving, self-defense, critical decisions within seconds. Under the particular facts of this incident right here, there was a confrontation in a wooded area nearby the apartment complex in question, and from the very moment that the two were exchanging words, Mr. Murray was aggressive. He was non-cooperative. The officer actually did, and I'm not going to dig through and read to you, but if you look at the news release that we put out back in 2019, a lot of the conversation is recited in there, and the fact that Mr. Murray actually advanced on the police officer, lunging towards him, causing the officer at one point to pull out his weapon and put it at what they call low ready, which essentially is pointed at the ground, and literally exchange with him, "I don't want to hurt you. Please show me your hands and get your hands away from your waistband." Language like that. The actual quotes are in the report, so please refer to the report for the actual quotes. And again, the conversation was largely corroborated by an eyewitness that was nearby. But this unraveled very quickly. And the officer has a split second or two decision to determine what the threat is, and that's why the standard that they're judged by under 9A16040 is an objective standard. Would a reasonable officer, knowing all the facts and circumstances that were known to the officer at the time, including his perceptions, and they may turn out to have been wrong. The question is not whether they were right or wrong in terms of the perceptions, but whether it was reasonable for the officer to believe what he or she did. And that's the standard that gets applied to the situation. And it is, it's an overused phrase, Monday morning quarterbacking, that sort of thing. We can look at it with the benefit of time, with the benefit of sleeping on it overnight, coming back and having another meeting. And I look at some of the allegations that are laid out here in the lawsuit, and I look at the situation as it was actually happening to Deputy Wallace at the time, and there was just very little time for anything other than a reaction of some kind because of the aggressive actions of Mr. Murray. There's no indication that I recall that Deputy Wallace, and the sheriff may know more because he's got actual reports there. I'd have to refer to the investigation, and it's been several years. But no indication that I can recall that Deputy Wallace knew anything about any mental health conditions that Mr. Murray may have had at the time that he encountered him. What he had was an angry, aggressive suspect reaching into his waistband area. Law enforcement officers will tell you that in their experience, and in my experience in reviewing these reports, this area right here, when a suspect is digging around in that area, is a sign of very much danger to a police officer. They get very apprehensive. All they want to see is these. And Mr. Murray wasn't showing those, and then eventually reached for something in his pocket. It appeared to the deputy that it was a knife, and he responded accordingly. But it wasn't just that, it was what led up to that, and the time frame was very compressed. And again, the standard is, would a reasonable officer in a similar situation, knowing what this officer knew and perceiving what he was perceiving at the time, would they also, a reasonable officer standard, have felt that the use of deadly force was necessary to prevent harm to the officer or, in some cases, another person?
Knowing how many mental health incidents officers are responding to on a very regular basis, is there room for improvement? Based on what has happened here, is there an opportunity for additional intervention? Other departments have added other mental health crisis teams to accompany officers. Is there room for that in your department?
Well, apparently you don't know anything about the Spokane County Sheriff's Office if you're asking that, because we put out multiple press releases about the BHU unit that we already have. We have that capability. As a matter of fact, I've talked with Board of County Commissioners and said, you know, if I had my way, we'd have 24/7, 7 days a week coverage in that arena. And I think the board also agrees with that, and hopefully we will find the budget to finally get there. But here's the harsh reality. Even if we had it, there's not enough mental health professionals to fill it. We have a hard enough time staffing the current team that we have with mental health professionals because there's a drought of that particular skill set. So it's not that we don't have it, we have it. It's not that we don't want it, we want more of it. But we need to be able to get the properly trained people to do that particular skill set. But that just amazes me that after, I believe, that we're in our 4th year of having that capability in our community, that people don't realize that we have that. We were one of the leading agencies in creating that. Again, when do we get the credit for being the trendsetters, for being the ones on the forefront, for trying to improve the situations? And we have been doing that for the last 4 years.
Are you saying that there was a mental health crisis team there with the deputy?
Not there,
Right.
but we have the capability. Now, could we get more? You just heard me say, if I had my way, I'd like to get more. Yes, but what does that change, Whitney, when this guy is running through the woods, spins, and in microseconds the decision is made? Do you think the behavioral health unit individual is going to be running through the woods with them? I think we need to really take a harsh look at what the total circumstances behind this was. Again, this wasn't in a sterile environment where we could get a behavioral mental health team to that situation and everything's calm, everything's cool, everything's collect. The BHU person can talk to you and try to talk you down. Pretty hard to do when you're running through the woods. Pretty hard to do when the individual turns, becomes aggressive, lunges, and draws something from a pocket. I don't think the mental health person is going to be able to help very much in that situation.
Tell me about body cameras. How many of your officers are wearing them?
We have all the deputies on patrol wearing them currently right now, and quite frankly, I can tell you this based on what I've read. Had we had the body cameras, we wouldn't have $1 million settlement here. That would have ended this situation right then and there.
When did they start wearing them, all of them?
January.
Of this year. So it's fairly recent.
Fairly recent.
Do you think that they bring value?
Well, again, I've spoken to this issue for about the last decade because it's been part of my strategic planning since 2007 with car cameras. If I didn't think they brought value, they wouldn't be being worn right now. Yes, they bring value, and we finally got the money to implement them, and they are being worn.
What do you think would have changed if they had been wearing them at the time of this incident?
I don't think this incident stops because they're wearing body cameras. What would have changed would we would have had the direct evidence of what actually happened, and I doubt you would have had $1 million lawsuit.
Whitney, they definitely bring value. Early on, one of the earliest, that I think the two earliest in Spokane County to have body cameras were Liberty Lake and Airway Heights. And at the time, shortly after Airway Heights got them, I spoke to the police chief out there, and I was informed that officer complaints were way down as soon as body cameras. When the suspect knew that they were being recorded, video and audio, all of a sudden the complaints went way down. I think they're hugely valuable for that. I also think from the standpoint of making prosecution decisions, and that includes any scenario, whether it's an officer-involved situation or something that happens as a result of a 911 call in Spokane Police or Spokane County Sheriff's now, that they roll up to a residence or to a building or a crime scene of some kind. Reviewing that body cam footage actually impacts not only our decisions whether or not to charge, and in some cases what to charge, but it also enhances case resolutions, because everybody can see what happened and everybody can tell that if it's admitted by the court exactly what that's going to depict. So I believe very much in the use of body cameras, and I've supported it from the start. And I find it useful in all aspects of not only my job as the reviewer of situations like this, but also for all of my deputies in what they do and the cases that they receive.
Based on this incident, do you think there's room for improvement? What do you think needs to change?
Well, you know, let's go to the mental illness aspect. Even though I still, again, have no evidence to believe that I can recall, and certainly wasn't in the press release. It might be detailed in a report. I also brought Deputy Wallace's full statement here, and that's a matter of public record right now as well for somebody to review. But I believe that the state is making great progress in some areas. For instance, the legislation that requires de-escalation and getting distance and buying time, and if you've got behavioral health experts, use them, and that sort of thing. But what they don't provide is the money. And what they maybe can't provide is the sheriff has alluded to, we're short on people in certain professions. And so I think the state is woefully underfunding mental health treatment facilities, encouraging people to go into those professions, providing tuition and financial incentives and that sort of thing. It's real easy to pass legislation that says you should have these, you should use these and this and that, and then it's up to communities like the county, whose general fund depends on sales tax and property tax, to now first of all find these professionals and be able to pay for them as well. I think there are more situations where they would be helpful than not, but there will be occasions, and this is one that kind of points in that direction, where it may not have mattered if they were even in the area, if they weren't directly on the scene, and at the time the law didn't require, as it does today, the creation of distance and time, and so the legislation tends to evolve with every meeting of the legislature, requiring more of these types of alternatives to the use of force. But in the end, will we be able to eliminate it if that's the goal? I don't know that that's realistic. I think there will be those cases. But I think there are many opportunities with the proper funding and the proper prioritization by the legislature to assist the counties in providing these services and getting people. I mean, we're pretty soon we're not even going to have enough airline pilots, they say, and they have been unable to take steps to even rectify that. And we have a doctor shortage, we have a nurse shortage, and we definitely have a shortage of behavioral health experts, and particularly those who may not, some of them, want to be riding along with the police. They maybe prefer a different setting. So there's a lot of factors, but I think the state can help us out. I do believe we're making progress, but it's a long, hard road, and there's a lot of factors that not one single agency is going to be able to control.
And the other aspect to the mental health issue is when you have a system that lets people out of the institution into halfway houses and they fill at the halfway house level and they kick them to the street, because that's what happens, you think things are going to go well? If you fill at the halfway house, maybe we send them back to the institution to get restabilized, bring them back to the halfway houses and try it again. But kicking somebody with mental health to the street because they fell at a halfway house, again, the system is broken. You can't just force people with mental illness to the street.
Murray's family has asked that there be changes. What is your department willing and able to do in order to try and do everything that you can to make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
Whitney, we've already done that. All right. Again, you act, I won't put that directly at you, but there are people out there that act like we haven't done anything.
I don't think
we
that's
have.
not what I'm saying, at least.
Yeah,
but
we have.
I think that the family has asked in very specific instances about institutional change here in your department.
And we've already done that.
So there's nothing to change. There's nothing else that you can do.
We continue to modify. We continue to grow. We continue to make, training modifications. That is continual. It's not because they're demanding anything. We started making these changes way before there was any demand to do anything. That's where I think I really get a little bit upset with that line of questioning when it's like, what, you don't recognize that we were already on this path? We've already created these type of units. We were one of the first in the state to create these type of units, and we continue to modify. We continue to push the state of Washington to please put CIT training in the basic academy at the 40-hour level. It's not. We continue to fight with them to get this critical training at the 40-hour level in the curricula at the basic academy level. We're creating our own 40-hour CIT training, which we will get certified at the national level, something that the state of Washington doesn't do. We're already doing all of these things that you're talking about. There's no mandate here. There was no criticism. We didn't do this because somebody made us do it. We did it because it's the best policy. It's the best thing to do. When do those who always want to throw the rocks really take a look at what your law enforcement at the local level is truly doing, and what they're trying to do is to stay ahead of the curve and try to be the best that they can across the board. This region's always been that type of law enforcement agencies across the board. We try to stay ahead of the curves. We've been there. We continue to do that, and we will always continue to do that. I have a philosophy. Any agency that says that they're all that in a bag of chips and they don't have to change anything, but we've always done it that way, so we're always going to do it that way, is an agency that is going to fail. We have never done that. That is not our philosophy, and there's nothing in here that this plaintiff's attorney can demand that we're already not doing.
And I hear you. And we have covered multiple times. I personally have covered many of the trainings that you guys have added into your curriculum. I do understand that. But do you understand the other position that in this incident, it sounds like at least you are saying that everything was handled perfectly, and yet a man died. So is there anything else that can be learned from what happened?
We always try to learn from what's happened. We tore this thing apart internally. What could we have done differently? You know, there are certain circumstances that we respond to the stimulus that is giving us. We all forget what the first nature of this call was. An individual in the neighborhood of, well, actually in the courtyard of an apartment complex around children. That's what the deputies responded to. This individual took off running. He was chased, he spun, and there wasn't any, the deputies were given no opportunity to do anything other than respond. That's what we do. Now, what could we have done different? We looked at that. And tragically, I'll never be able to do that, Whitney, because I wasn't there. I wasn't facing that individual. I wasn't facing the stimulus that the deputy was. I can only Monday morning quarterback this thing. I can what if this all day long with you. I can never stand in the shoes of that deputy and decide, oh yeah, we could have done X differently. I don't know right now. We tore this apart. We looked at it. There are certain events that happen. Tragic events happen. Unfortunately, they happen at a very rare level. This is rare. You keep mentioning $1 million lawsuit. And you might want to start taking a look at what's been going on nationally. $1 million is nothing anymore.
But it is.
It's sad. You know.
$1 million is in this county, and it's the biggest since AutoZone. Am I not?
No,
correct?
you are absolutely incorrect.
Then tell me, is that
$2.2 million is the one that is for the sheriff's office.
okay?
All right, it's not. $2.2 million.
Either way, 1 million, 2 million is a lot for the county.
It is.
So, is there anything that needs to change that is in your control?
Again, we always try to change. We always try to look at things to change. I think I've covered that ad nauseum for you. And here's the thing that really needs to change. Maybe some pressure needs to be put on the governor of the state of Washington to get our training fixed. Maybe that would, because if I was able to sit and step up and get on a stand and testify that yes, the curricula of the state of Washington is evidence-based, is best practice, has had a job task analysis done on it, maybe we wouldn't even be here today. But that's what the facts are. The facts that our training is in that type of shambles at the state level leads to this type of thing for the entire state of Washington. Every sheriff and chief, every city, county faces this eventuality because we can't seem to get CJTC to fix their problems. CJTC is not an accredited organization. I have a question for you. Would you send your children to a non-accredited college? The answer is no. Then why are we sending deputies to a non-accredited training academy?
How many mental health crisis teams does the sheriff's department have?
I think we're up to 2, 3 right now. It's a combined city, county, regional task force.
So how often are they able to go out on calls?
They're not 24/7. It's when they're working. Yeah. And I've already approached that side of it. Everybody knows if I had my way and I had the funding, we would fill 24/7. Does this change what happened today? So I don't think so. Not on this one. Maybe on others. But what about all the others that we do de-escalate? We've given and we put out all the successes that those teams have had. Maybe that's part of the story also, is how many successes happen because of the efforts that we are doing.
Mr. Haskell, is there anything else that you think is important as we talk about $1 million settlement for the county and what you are able to do to try and prevent these types of things from happening again?
What I do is one of the 39 elected prosecutors in the state, as a member of the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, is we get opportunities to testify at legislative hearings, both in the state Senate and the House. And anything that will assist in mental health, not only training for law enforcement, facilities, funding for, again, to address the shortage of mental health professionals, and to create incentives for them to want to be a part of this type of behavioral health, service, as opposed to in an office setting or something like that, is important, and I would support that funding. I've watched the state of the budget for mental health in Washington just dwindle. It just sits at the bottom of the priorities, and we all acknowledge that as a result of whether it's drug use or just an increase of mental health issues in our population generally, we all acknowledge that that exists, but yet it doesn't seem to be addressed as a priority by the legislature. And I don't know what the current funding numbers are, but I know they could be a lot better. And I believe, quite frankly, potentially as a result of the Blake decision, that we may see more co-occurring disorders as a result of drug use contributing to or aggravating persons who are borderline possibly already and pushing them over the line. And I think we need to recognize that as a society. And I've said many times, civilized society takes care of its most vulnerable citizens. And Washington State is failing.
Is there anything within your control of the county that can be done?
In the county itself, I have very little control over that. I do sit on the SRLJC. We make advisory decisions to the Board of County Commissioners, but again, it's funding issues. And you know what the board relies on, I've already talked about it. I think it ultimately has to involve the state in cooperation with the counties. But anytime we talk about assistance in mental health, I think it's important that we get on board and support it. And we've got a number of programs. We've had some pilot programs going on right now with the diversions and that sort of thing that we've been trying to get people opportunities who are not severely mentally ill, but are in maybe even just mental crisis at the time, and get them to a place where they can be safe, and their treatment issues can be addressed. Again, with the understanding in many of those instances it's voluntary, and sometimes when it's voluntary, it may take them to bottom out at some point and in some manner before they'll be willing to accept the treatment, just like drug treatment generally. It's very hard sometimes for people to recognize that they have a problem that they can't just solve on their own. And going back to the street isn't going to be helpful.
And I'll go also, you keep saying what we can do. Whitney, again, we put out a press release. You all have it. It won't be on anybody's story list, but you have it. The truth of the matter is, we have sent use of force training. We totally rewrote the curricula for it. Us, in conjunction with several other agencies in the state of Washington, we sent that to IATLAS. It has been certified, and again, we are the only agency in the nation that does that. Here in about 14 days, we will do a groundbreaking ceremony. This is the value that the Spokane County Sheriff's Office and the Spokane County Board of County Commissioners place on training. We will break ground on a multi-million-dollar training facility to ensure that we have the best trained law enforcement officers in the state of Washington. I would also challenge you to take a look at how many agencies in the state of Washington have the training capability that we do. We train people from all over the world right here in Spokane County. As a matter of fact, because of the shambles that the state CJTC is in, especially the Belia level, I have offered my surrounding, well actually statewide, sheriffs to come and send their new rookies to our now 10-week post academy And the reason we have 10 weeks post-academy is to fix the problems that we have with the state, to ensure that they actually receive the training, because we know they're not receiving the training at the state level. We're at 10 weeks now. I've offered to have them, the other sheriffs, send their personnel. I can only have a certain bandwidth, first come, first serve, and we will put their people through a 10-week post-academy to ensure that they are trained in these critical issues. 40 hours of CIT is part of that critical issue that we need to get fixed. So we are doing everything that we can to correct the problem and to highlight the problem, and I will continue to push to get this fixed.
Have you spoken to Murray's family?
Have I spoken to Murray's family? No, we have not spoken to Murray's family.
What would you say to them?
That they're right, the system failed them. They are absolutely right. The system failed them.
Anything else?
That's it.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate both of your time.